Now let's set the scene. Crete, the big island in the Mediterranean that pretty much defined Bronze Age vibes before the mainland Greeks got their act together. By the time these myths were being told, Crete was legendary for its palaces, its kings, and its habit of producing labyrinth-themed tourist attractions. King Minos ruled here, or at least he was supposed to. Minos was one of those rulers who constantly tried to prove he was more important than he actually was. The kind who'd call staff meetings just to remind everyone he was in charge. At some point, Minos had prayed to Poseidon, god of the sea, asking for a sign of divine favor. And Poseidon, being a god with a flair for spectacle, sent him a bull. Not just any bull, of course, a magnificent, dazzling white creature that looked like it had been polished by the heavens. This was not your average pasture cow. This was basically the Ferrari of livestock. The kind of animal you were supposed to look at and think, wow, the gods really like that guy. The deal was simple. Minos was supposed to sacrifice the bull back to Poseidon, proving that he honored the god's gift. A symbolic gesture, a bit like borrowing a friend's expensive car, showing it off, and then returning it without a scratch. Only Minos didn't. He looked at this miraculous bull and thought, actually, I'll keep it. Surely Poseidon won't mind if I swap in a less impressive cow for the sacrifice. Spoiler. Poseidon minded. He minded a lot. And instead of just punishing Minos directly, maybe sinking his palace or sending a storm, Poseidon did something far pettier. He cursed the bull, made it wild, untamable, violent. It tore through Crete's fields, wrecked farmland, terrified farmers, and generally turned island life into a very stressful experience. And just to really drive the point home, Poseidon also cursed Minos' wife, Pasiphaë, to fall in love with the bull. Yes, that's where the Minotaur eventually comes from, the not-so-wholesome union of queen and divine livestock. So Minos' failure to make one proper sacrifice ended up derailing his entire dynasty. Now Hercules doesn't care about all of that. He's not in Crete to solve Pasiphaë's bizarre romantic entanglements, nor is he there to redesign a labyrinth. He just has a list of chores. And Eurystheus, his cousin king and master of busy work, has decided this is his next one. Go to Crete, catch the bull, bring it back. And once again, Hercules sighs, shrugs, and sets out to do it. The voyage itself isn't described in much detail, but we can imagine it. Hercules boarding a creaky old ship, crewed by men who had no idea they were about to share deck space with a furious monster. The sea calmed, the wind steady, Hercules probably sitting in the prow, wearing his lion-skin cloak, looking like the kind of passenger who doesn't even need a life jacket because drowning just wouldn't dare happen to him. When he lands in Crete, he heads straight to King Minos. And here's the surprising bit. Minos doesn't try to stop him. He doesn't argue, doesn't pull rank. He basically says, if you can catch it, you can have it. Which tells you exactly how done he was with this problem. The bull had ruined his island, ruined his reputation, and arguably ruined his marriage. If a wandering demigod wanted to take a crack at it, Minos was more than happy to let him. So Hercules set off to find the bull, and of course he did, because that's his job. You can picture the scene: rolling hills, dry Cretan landscapes, olive groves scattered across the slopes, and somewhere in the distance, the glint of horns and the thud of hooves as the bull trampled yet another vineyard. The creature was huge, powerful, foaming at the mouth, charging at anyone foolish enough to stand in its way. But Hercules didn't flinch. He never did. This wasn't the Nemean lion, whose hide no weapon could pierce. It wasn't the Hydra, whose heads grew back with interest. This was just a bull, strong, yes, furious, yes, but ultimately mortal. Hercules wrestled it to the ground, muscles straining, probably muttering something like, "Why is this my life?" under his breath, and tied it up. Job done. But the real comedy, or horror, depending on your perspective, comes next. Because once you've caught a bull, you still have to deliver it. And this was not a package you could just slap a shipping label on and send through Hermes Express. Hercules had to transport the living, raging bull across the sea, back to Greece. Imagine the ship's crew, already seasick, already nervous, and now sharing deck space with a snorting, stomping, divine cow. No amount of strong rope could make that feel safe, but Hercules was unbothered. He probably sat calmly nearby, hand resting on the rope, while the sailors whispered prayers and cursed their luck. When they finally landed and delivered the bull to Eurystheus, the king once again panicked. Because Eurystheus was great at giving orders, but terrible at dealing with their results. He had asked for the bull, but when it showed up at his doorstep, he wanted nothing to do with it. Eventually, the bull was released, allowed to wander free. Which brings us to another fun mythic crossover, because the Cretan bull, once loose on the mainland, wandered north to Marathon. Yes, that Marathon, where it became known as the Marathonian bull, terrorizing the countryside until another hero, Theseus, finally killed it. So Hercules' seventh labor didn't end with a neat bow. It didn't eliminate the bull, it just moved the problem. Classic Greek mythology, no issues ever actually get solved. They just migrate into another story. And that's part of what makes this labor so quietly fascinating. On the surface, it looks like a filler episode. Hercules caught a bull, tied it up, transported it. Done. But underneath, it's woven into so many bigger myths. Minos' arrogance, Pasiphae's curse, the birth of the Minotaur, and eventually the adventures of Theseus. The Cretan bull wasn't just a creature. It was a thread linking entire sagas together. It also highlights how Hercules' labors weren't about glory. They were about humiliation. Eurystheus didn't want him remembered as a hero. He wanted him remembered as a man forced to do chores. Herd some cows, scrub some stables, fetch some apples. And yet, ironically, these are the very stories that made Hercules immortal in culture. We don't remember him for leading armies or ruling kingdoms. We remember him for wrestling lions, hydras, and, yes, bulls. The busy work became the legacy. So, in the end, Hercules completed the labor. Another tick on the list. And as always, Eurystheus probably congratulated himself for making life difficult, while Hercules prepared for the next absurdity. The bull wandered off, the island of Crete got some peace, and mythology quietly shuffled the monster into another corner of the stage. And with that, the seventh labor drifts to a close, not with blood, not with thunder, but with a sigh. Hercules, ever patient, ever exhausted, sailing back across the sea. The demigod reduced once again to glorified animal control.